What a wonderful privilege it is to be here today. Thank you. I appreciate it. As I told the kids last week when I was talking to them, I said, I appreciate it. I'm the last thing between you and your diploma, but I said, I'm 50 and you're not, so you have to listen to me. They tried to. They really did a good job. Well, what I'm going to share with you today is, I can't say that it's my story, because it's a story that God gave me. And I became convinced a long time ago that my job is to simply tell the story of what happened. And it's a story about passion, and it's a story about perseverance, and it's all around following, what God put in your heart. It talks about it in 1 Corinthians. That, each one of us are given very specific gifts. Some of us are going to be teachers. Some of us are going to be preachers. Some of us are going to be healers. I very much believe that each and everybody that we meet has something that allows them to be special, something that allows them to be great. Now, that gift is from God, and I always say that discovering God is finding out what that gift is. Experiencing God is when you live your life walking with Him by your side, doing that gift. Because a lot of times, a lot of us will figure out what that gift is and what that passion is. Let's just call it passion that's in our heart. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing it, that we're taking that step of courage and pursuing it. And I do very much believe that there's some point in our life that each and every one of us, we start off pursuing a passion. And I'll be the first. I'm going to talk about myself today. We start off pursuing that passion, but how many times do we find ourselves settling for a paycheck? We go out to make a life, and we settle for making a living. Okay? Huge difference between those two. And when you find yourself in that position, and I was one of them, I mistakenly thought that the more money I made, the happier I would be in life. And I tell you what, the lessons that I learned in that, I was so far off on that. You see, there's 3 things I believe you get from your career. Okay? One, the reason that you're doing what you're doing is because you're growing. You're going toward a certain goal, a certain position, a certain aspiration. Number 2, you're doing something that you're passionate about, that you truly believe in the cause or the company that you're working toward. Number 3, you're doing it because you're getting paid. You're making a living. You have responsibilities. Now, as many of y'all know, there's different seasons in your life. If you find yourself in a season where you're blessed to have all 3 of them, hold on to that. Hold on to that and be thankful for it. Because most of the time, you'll find yourself in a position where you might have 2 or you might have 1. And let me be the first to tell you, if you find yourself in that position, that what you're doing is not because you're learning and growing, okay? You're not engaged. Number 2, you're not doing something that you're passionate about. But if you find yourself in a position, a stage in your life, that all you're doing, the reason that you're doing things on a day-to-day basis is simply before the money, I will be the first to tell you, no matter what that activity is, it is a long, long day. And there's a hole in your heart and your soul that no matter how much money you're making, it's never going to fill that. I love talking to little kids and asking them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you hear the most beautiful things. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a football player. I want to be a dancer. I want to be a theater. I want to be an actor. No matter what it is. You know what's beautiful about that? Nobody has told them what they can't do yet. Nobody has said, you're too short, you're not fast enough, you're not smart enough. It's that passion that's in their heart of what they believe. So much of how we see ourselves and what we believe determines the life we live. It all absolutely starts up here. How we see ourselves determines our activities and every decision that we make. And when we believe in ourselves, and we believe, quite frankly, in our Creator and what God put in our heart, that's where we're able to grow and that's where we're able to prosper. If you ask me when I was a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? There was no reason for this, but I said, I want to own a restaurant. I want to be a cook. And I didn't come from a family of cooks and restaurants. We had a bunch of doctors and lawyers and all that boring stuff, it was out there. And my parents thought I was crazy. But you know what? That's what, I don't know why. That's just what I wanted to do. And the day I grew up in Jacksonville, and the day I turned 16, back then you couldn't go get a job until you turned 16. I cut grasses and all that growing up. I'd always work. But this was my first real job. And there was a little pizza place in San Marco called The Loop. And I went and I filled out the application, and I put on there, the position you're applying for, and I put the cook, and I got the call back. And I was so excited, and I remember telling my mom, I said, I'm going to work, I'm going to learn how to cook, I'm so excited. So I go there, I meet the manager, fill out the paperwork, he says, okay, come on, let me introduce everybody and show you your station. I said, well, fantastic. So he walks me through the front of the house, meet everybody, walks me through the kitchen, okay, meets all the cook, and then he brings me back to this dark little corner over here where the dishwashing machine is sitting. And he says, congratulations, you're our new dishwasher. And I said, I was so young, and naive. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, sir, there must be a misunderstanding. I did. And I had the opportunity, I said, I applied for the cook. And he looked at me, and this was a great lesson. He said, son, you have to work for what you want, okay? Now, I learned so many lessons, all right, because my head was down. Those first couple of days, I said, oh, man. I said, and, back then, this is my station in life. This is what I'm going to do. And my head was down for a few days. And then, one of the lessons I learned, if you're not doing something you're passionate about, bring passion into what you're doing. You want to change not only your station, your attitude, your continence in life, change the way you look at it. And quite frankly, when you change everybody and everything around you. When you become that light, even in that dark corner, it's amazing the power that God has given us to influence and impact everybody around us. Well, a couple days go by, my head's down, and I said, you know what, this isn't me. I said, I need something to lift me up. So you remember when we were younger, remember those old tape recorders? They used to be blue and yellow, they had the little handles on. And remember you had to push down, play and record at the same time? You had to wait for the darn DJ to stop talking, so you can get that song when, and I'm telling this to my daughter who's a teenager years ago. She's looking at me, Dad, why do you just download this song? What's wrong with you? I don't know, I guess I was slow back then, honey. So I brought in my tape deck, and I just put it above my dishwashing station. And I did it for my own edification, just so I would lift my spirits up. And sure enough, man, I felt great. I'm listening to Stones and Jimmy Buffett and stuff like that, and they said, you know what? Before I knew it, people started coming and hanging out with me, and then I said, great. Well, then I started timing things. Maybe we can help me do this. And we moved faster and faster. I was like, well, this is awesome. So the next week I brought these tiki lights, and I put these tiki lights all above the dishwashing station. I was doing it for myself. It was amazing how much I was learning about passion and about work, at that very little dark station in the back. Well, so about a week goes by, and the manager comes up and says, John, he says, I'm so happy with you. He says, congratulations, you're going to get promotion. I said, oh, thank goodness. And I'm saying to myself, I finally get to cook. He grabs me by the shoulder. He walks me through the kitchen again. I say hey to all the cooks. He brings me out the front of the house and says, congratulations, you're our new busboy. Honest to goodness story, okay? I worked my way all through high school. My dad left our family, and I worked my way all the way through college, okay? And I worked in restaurants the whole time. Never, ever once was I allowed to cook in the kitchen. Never. The truth is, I had to open my own dang restaurant just so I could actually get in there and do it. Now, all right, so I talked to a lot of people, okay? And you find out, what was that passion? What was it that you wanted to be? Now, I went on a healthcare career, okay? Something changed in my life that knocked me off of that passion, made me forget about it, and all of a sudden then I wanted to be the president of a big healthcare company, okay? Well, I worked toward that, and I think I was 42 years old, and I found myself, I was the president of $1.5 billion pharmaceutical company, okay? And I couldn't have been more unhappy. Could not have been more unhappy, because it was the pursuit, it was the challenge that drove me there. And then once I got there, that wasn't what God wired me to be doing. And until you start to do that life, no matter how much you do it, you're like on a treadmill. That's not going anywhere. And I talked to so many people, and I asked two questions that I asked myself years ago. What is it that you would love to be doing? Okay? If you could take money out of the equation, if you could take risk out of the equation, and quite frankly, take age out of the equation. Okay? It's never too late to pursue your dream, by the way. Never. What would you be doing? Now, it has to be occupation. You can't say, I'll be sitting on the beach drinking margaritas all day, okay? You got to be doing something productive, right? And, they'll say, I hear the most beautiful things. And most of the time it revolves around other people. It revolves around kids. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a coach. I want to pour into other men and women. I want to help them grow. And I'll ask the question that I ask myself, why don't you go do it? Why? Just that simple. Why don't you go do it? And the answers are the same thing that I said 10 years ago. I'm too old to do that. I've got a great career. I have a mortgage payment. I got car. I got kids in school. I said, 9 out of 10 restaurants fail. It's too risky. What if I'm not good enough at it? I've never done that before. You know what the common thread to all that is? Fear. Fear. God bless you. It's fear. Fear, I believe, is the tangible weapon the enemy uses to keep us away from what God intended us to be. 2 Timothy 1:7 said, "For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but one of courage and strength and perseverance." And when you listen to those words of fear, you know how you hear fear? The onset of fear is worry. The onset of worry is doubt. And you think about all those things I just said, it's doubt. Doubt is underpinning behind all of it. And you start to doubt, not quite frankly yourself, you doubt those things, that wonderful gift that God gave you to be great at. And you can't listen to those lies. You can't. If it's in your heart, it's from God. You know why? The word heart is used 892 times in the Bible. Third only to God and to Lord. And there's a reason for that. That's where God stirs us. That's where He talks to us. I wish He'd give us a clear message or thunder or text, but it's not. He stirs our heart. It's our job to align our heart to His Word so that we can hear it. And sometimes you need a wake-up call. Okay? Something needs to shake you up. Okay? Mine came in 2005. I just rediscovered Christ in about 2003, 2004. And I'm going down it, and it's so funny, the sequence of this, but it's really not. You ever heard of Kierkegaard, an old theologian, 19th century? He said, we live our lives moving forward, but we tend to understand our lives looking back. Everything happens for a reason. And even when we're in the thick of those problems and those thicks of times and challenges that we face, you know what? They're a blessing. If you didn't endure the challenges that you did in your life, you wouldn't be the person you are sitting here today. And look around. You know what? We don't have it so bad off. We made it through. And quite frankly, next time you go through something like that, do yourself a favor, write it on a note and keep it in your wallet. And remind yourself how God got you out of it. So the next time you're in the middle of it and you forget and you think you're all alone and you think you can't do it, pull that note out. And just remember how bad it was. It's the things that we complain about become the chains that bind us. And you choose whether to keep that down or not. I learned a lesson a long time ago. When you're facing one of those challenges and you're in the midst of it, a long time ago, I used to ask God why He was doing this to me. I learned a lesson. So why don't you ask God what He's trying to show you in this situation? There's always a lesson, and that lesson is not to hurt you. Quite frankly, it's there to draw you closer to Him. Well, my wake-up call came in 2005, and I'll never forget this day. It was a Friday afternoon, and on my desk I have a phone, and on that phone there's two lines. There's a direct line that only 4 or 5 people know, and there's a line that goes through my assistant. And all the other calls came through that line. One day, my direct line rang, and I'll never forget, I picked it up, and it was this lady on the other end, and she was crying. And I'll never forget the words she said, Mr. Rivers, I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. Now, my daughter, Cameron, was in kindergarten at the time. And I said, what happened? What's wrong with Cameron? And she said in her tears, she says, her terminal brain tumor. Okay. Now, I hung up the phone with this lady, okay, and it took me about 20 minutes to get a hold of my wife. Okay. Now, here's some irony. Right? All those years in healthcare, guess what I was leading? I was leading the cancer department of a pharmacy that treated kids and patients all over the world. Never until that very single moment did I have any appreciation for what it must be like to have somebody that you love going through something like that. And I learned 2 lessons in that. I always tell people, if money can solve the issue, it's not a true problem. You think about it. When you're in a position, no matter what your title is, no matter how much money you have, no matter how many people you work, it's not going to change it. That's a true problem. And the other lesson I learned in that? Sometimes you have to get to a point where all you have left is Jesus to realize that all you need is Jesus. And some... I got a hold of Monica, after that 20 minutes, okay? And thank God it wasn't Cameron, okay? It was a mistaken call, okay? That 20 minutes shook me up, woke me up so much. I remember telling Monica, we're going to find this family. And we found her. It took us about a week. Now get this. Her name was Megan. Beautiful little girl. Okay? Megan wasn't in Cameron's class. Megan didn't go to the same church, didn't go to the same school. We didn't live in the same neighborhood. There was no reason that phone call came on my direct line that day. Okay, and I know it wasn't a mistake because the words I remember most were, Mr. Rivers, I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. Okay? I'll tell you the rest of the story, but I'll tell you this. What's it been, like 13 years now? To this day, we don't know who the phone call came from. Okay? No one has ever said, oh, that was me, or many times as we shared this story. Had that phone call, had that mistaken phone call not come to my desk, I would not be standing up here talking to you about what God's done in my life today. I am absolutely convinced it was by design, and it happened that way. Now, we still had some lessons to learn. All right, so we found this whole family. At first, I'm lining them up with indigent care and giving them free drugs and doing all this thing. And about a week or so later, I realized they don't need more drugs. They don't need more nurses. They need money. So I call up the husband, and I said, hey, John, I said, let me write you a check. I know what you're going through. He said, absolutely not. And we argued about it for about 10 minutes, hung up the phone. And that's when I felt the first tangible push ever I felt from God. And like I said, it wasn't a thunder. It wasn't anything like that. It was a stir in my heart, and it was simply, you pick up that phone. Don't you give up. You just trust me. So I said, all right. So I picked up the phone, and I called him back, and I said, hey, John, it's me again. He says, yeah, I know. I just told you no. And literally, I didn't know what I was going to say. I'm making it up on the spot. I said, hey, let me, how about if we host a barbecue for you at your church, and whenever you want to, and all the money from it will go for little Megan, okay? So he calls his wife back and calls me back and says, okay, we're game. We'll let you do that, but it needs to be 10 days from now because little Megan's going to go into her next round of chemo after that. I'm saying, hey, great, no problem. I got my little egg out back, I'll cook, we're no issue, 450 people RSVP'd for this. We didn't have the equipment. We didn't have the know-how. We didn't have the storage. And by the way, I'm running this big company. I got a real job that I'm doing over here, okay? That's when God showed up, okay? God showed up. It was amazing, and sometimes, for you to really appreciate His full glory, you got to get to that point where you can't take credit for what's happening. You got to get to that point where nothing that you're doing is behind it. And I'll tell you what, I remember one day my wife called me up, and she says, you better get home. And I said, what's for? She says, you'll see when you get here. So I get in my truck, and I drive down home, down I-4, come up, and I'm pulling into our driveway, and I screech on the brakes. And in my driveway, there's this big trailer smoker, okay, that's parked like from here down to the end of that column. Okay, there's huge, big barrel ones, and it had a yellow sticky on it. And it said, hey, John, I hear you might need this. And a phone number. That was it. That was it. Well, that event came 10 days later. We fed all those people, and we raised a lot of money for this beautiful little girl, and nobody got sick. At night, I'll never forget, I was lying out flat on the ground at home, and Monica comes over, and she's poking me. She says, you okay? I'm like, oh, I feel so alive. And she said, you don't look alive. I said, no. I said, I want to do this. And I couldn't articulate it at the time. But you know what it was? That old passion, that gift that God gave me, woke up. I used that passion. I aligned it with my actions. And I did it for the right purpose. Okay? You want to talk about happiness? You want to talk about success? When you take that passion, that thing that you were created to be doing, okay? And you do it as your action, okay? And you do it specifically for the right reason, for God's work and God's kingdom. That's when mountains move. That's when happiness comes, because it has nothing to do with money. You're going to find that happiness in it. And I couldn't define it at the time. At that moment, we started what we called our barbecue ministry. Okay? And for the next 4 years, out of the garage anytime kids or schools or churches would call on they need money. I said, okay, I'll write you a check, but hey, I got a smoker. How about if I bring a smoker out and we'll cook for you for your event, and we won't charge you anything, and all the money you can sell whatever you want to, and you keep it all. So we did it year after year after year, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Monica said, you're just doing this so you get bigger smokers year after year after year. She was right. That last year in the garage, we served over 40,000 people in the ministry. Okay? Now, I had retired in, 2007. Okay? When they asked me, what are you going to do when you're retired? They think, well, my thanks, I just retired and automatically opened a store. It was 2 years later I opened a store. You know why I retired? Because I realized I wasn't doing it with my heart. I wasn't learning anything. I was just there for the money. And the more weekend ministry work I was doing, that disparity in my heart became clearer and clearer and wider. And I got to the point, I always tell people, you bring passion into what you're doing. And if you can't do that, and you can't get passionate about what you're doing, go find something different to do. Sometimes, and we wait. It is human nature. We will wait and wait and wait for that perfect situation before we make that jump. And I'll tell you, that's usually when you miss that opportunity. Sometimes you have to take ourselves out of the wrong position to allow ourselves to get into the right position. And had I not left that situation or left that relationship or left whatever it is that's holding you back that you're unhappy in, you don't allow God to open up those doors and show you what He has intended for you. So I just retired. I resigned. After 10 years of building this company up. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I was not happy. And quite frankly, I felt like I was stealing from the company because my heart wasn't there. And so we did the ministry. And I did strategic healthcare consulting on the side. And the ministry grew and grew. And because of that last year, we did so many people, I always say we had to get into a licensed facility. Monica will tell you, so get out of the house. You're tearing up my garage. We opened up a little teeny place. Anybody here ever go to our first little store on Fairbanks in Winter Park? Oh, thank y'all. It means you parked in one of 11 parking spots. That little place wasn't supposed to be, I thought I was an idiot. That little place wasn't supposed to be a restaurant. It was supposed to be a commissary that I could use to do my barbecue ministry out of. Matter of fact, we didn't think anybody was going to come into it. We actually, when we opened, we had, the little line, all the glass and everything. We had a bell, like a little hotel bell, because I figured we'd be in the back cooking for the ministry, and gosh, if somebody actually walked in, how would we know? Had to get our attention to it. So I go into building this thing, and I chose that place because if I was going to build and invest, I wanted to do it back in my community in a way to help. And that was an entry point into the city. I live in Winter Park, and it was bad. It was dilapidated. It was an old building. I said, how hard can it be? I've launched drugs all over the world. I've built pharmacies in almost every state. A little 1,100 square foot place, it's going to take nothing. Boy, was I in for it. You know why I was in for it? I'm convinced to this day, when you start stepping into your purpose, you will get the attention of the enemy. He does not want you to be successful at that. And I'll tell you what, it came. It came, and, passion is the first thing, perseverance is the second thing. You better be willing to fight for it. And this job was supposed to take, I think, 3.5 months. We had quotes from all of our builders and our consultants and equipment people. It was supposed to cost $188,000. 6 months later, over $500,000 of our family capital poured into this. And my contractor, God bless him, walks off the job, stops working because he was in a negative cash situation. Right? I'm at a complete standstill. By the way, did I mention to you, this is in 2009. Okay? All you financial planners out there, remember this here, right? All the money that we had from retirement, right, we put into mutuals that were down 60%. We built this great, big, beautiful home. I hate debt, so I put a lot of cash and capital into it. The moment we moved into it, we were upside down. I put aside a little over $500,000 just to have for the family. Okay? We were down, my wife and I were literally, we found ourselves after 20 years of marriage, we were down to 60 days of cash. Okay? 60 days of cash, and we didn't know how to get out of this situation. The whole thing was at a stop, and it was so far outside of my control. Now, here's where temptation steps in. Right? I get a phone call. My old boss, my old CEO, who I love this man, He was my spiritual mentor, and he was my business mentor. And he knew what I was going through. And he was buying 3 specialty pharmacies. He said, John, we're going to combine the assets here in Orlando. Would you like to be considered to be CEO of it? Okay. Now, this happened on a Friday. And thank goodness I had the fortitude and the fear to say, let me ask my wife about it. And pray about it this weekend. Okay? And I'll call you on Monday. And I'll tell you what, something happened. That Friday, my spirit was up here, because it seemed like here's a blessing. Oh, thank goodness to get me out of it. By Sunday, my spirit was down here. And you know why? It's a great litmus test. Was I going back to learn? Nope. Was I going back because I was passionate about it? Nope. Was I going back for the money? And you know what? 6 months, a year later, I bet you I would have been so unhappy, but I would have been stuck, quite frankly, at that point. Okay? I called him out, and thank goodness, this is key, thank goodness for the strength of faith of my wife, Monica. Because we prayed about it, and this is so important to have that right partner by your side. She prayed, and she said, John, she said, if you really believe this is what God wants you to be doing, I will stand by your side, support you doing, even if we lose everything. And what a weight that took off of my shoulder, and how easy and clear all of a sudden all the decisions were. Amazing, and I'm so thankful for her for that. I called Steve up and I told him no, and he asked me why. And I said, well, I believe this is what God wants me to be doing. I don't know how I'm getting out of this mess, but I believe this is what God wants me doing. And I said the second thing, I had 2 teenage children at the time, and I said, I would rather that they see that their father has the courage to pursue his dream and fail at it versus not even having the faith to take that step. It was Mark Twain that said, 20 years from now, you will regret more the things that you did not do versus those that you tried and failed at. Regret is a terrible, terrible thing. Fail. Try it. We bounce. We bounce. I promise you, I bounce a lot. We bounce. We come back. I hung up the phone. Everything changed at that single moment. Okay? Why? I look back on it. Now I think I understand it. Obedience and blessings. They go together. Talks about it in Isaiah, talks about it in Genesis. When God told Abraham to go out into the desert and go out and leave his family and go to a place that I will tell you. Okay? What people, they don't look at that verse. They look at the next verse. When you do that, you will be blessed and your descendants will be blessed and your descendants will be like sand on the beach. Okay? Go back up a verse and listen to that. Abram, he's called Abram at the time. I want you to leave your family, leave your father's household, gather your things. You ready for this? Go to a place I will tell you. He didn't tell him the details. He didn't tell him where he's going. He just simply said, trust me. When you obey, you will have these blessings, and how they absolutely correlate with each other. Everything changed with 2 phone calls. First phone call came from a buddy of mine on that Tuesday. Okay? He runs a Bible study where all these guys get together on Tuesday morning. Calls me that afternoon. There's a guy in the Bible study who lives in Maitland. He's got a fetish for some little coffee place in Winter Park. On the way up to Bible study, he goes by, gets on Fairbanks, goes to I-4, and goes up to it. That particular morning, he's sitting in the Bible study, and he's a mess. He's just all shaken up. And my buddy says to him, he says, what's wrong with you? He says, something happened this morning. I drove by this construction site on Fairbanks, and I felt like God talked to me. And my buddy says, what did he say? He says, he told me that the guy who's building this thing is in trouble, and he needs help. And my buddy says, he's in big trouble. He needs lots of help. Okay, you ready for this? The guy's name was Brad. Okay? His last name was Watkins. All right? Brad Watkins was a partner in a construction company called Friedrich Watkins. Friedrich Watkins had 2 clients in Orlando, Disney and SeaWorld. Okay? Brad Watkins and his company step into my life. Okay, you ready for this? They get us open, okay, CO and open, without ever taking money for it, 59 of the 60 days before we ran out of cash. Okay? And never took a penny for it, because God stirred his heart that morning. Second phone call came just a few days later. We're on the weekend. We're driving back from the beach. We're in the truck, and I got Bluetooth, and the kids are in the back seat. And I'll never forget this. I look down, and there's a voice message from a 404 phone number. And I remember saying to Monica, who's calling me from Atlanta? And I hit it. It was on speaker so everybody could hear it. And it said, Mr. Rivers, he said, this is Dan Cathy. He says, I work for Chick-fil-A. I'm like, you don't work for Chick-fil-A. You own Chick-fil-A. He says, I just had your brisket and your sauce. He said, that's the best thing I've ever had. He said, I felt God told me I'm supposed to step into your life, that you might need help. I just want to make myself available. So he gives me his home number, his cell number, his assistant's number. I'm not in the restaurant industry, okay? Out of the complete blue. I guess if you're Dan Cathy, you can find out who anybody is, and get to him. Now, I'll tell you what. Oh, you want to know how he got my product? This is the crazy part. Friends of his were down that weekend. They went to a ministry event that we did for one of the churches. We had leftover food, okay? And I always tell everybody, take anything you want home. They wrapped it up. They were going to a dinner party up in Atlanta. They were hit traffic, were running late for it, couldn't cook the thing that they had planned. So they took my brisket, put it in the microwave, put it on the table, and Dan and Rhonda had it on the table there. Yeah. People ask, well, how can you plan to build your business? Like, you better pray, buddy. Dan stepped into my life. Now, guess what he gave me? People say, oh, he gave you money. What did I need the most? I need money, but no. He gave me advice. He gave me confidence. He stood by my side. 3 things you can give people: your time, your talents, and your resources. You want to get them off your doorstep the fastest, you write them a check. You want to help them grow, you pour into them. You share your time, you share your experiences. He was there to answer any question. Boy, I had a lot of questions. What do we do? He stood by me. I got him a text from him this morning. He's on the way to Barcelona. I wanted to say goodbye before he left town. He continues to stand by my side. And it was a valuable, valuable lesson. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be wealthy to make an impact in somebody's life. You just become available, and you share one of the greatest gifts that God gave you, and that's to give people confidence. Give people confidence. Lift their spirits up by just words. That's all it takes is word. God created the whole universe with a word. Imagine what we can do with it, just for each other. We're coming up to opening. I remember asking Dan, I got to have a performer. I got to have a P&L. How much should we be doing in this? And I remember telling you, it's only 11. It was so small. This place was so small. He said, barbecue. He said, you do, $1,500 a day. You'd be doing market average. You do $2,000 a day, John. He said, you'd be doing great. So it was October 26 in 2009. We were down to 1 day of cash. We didn't have money to advertise. We didn't have money to buy promotions and do things. All the equipment we had was used. It was breaking down. We had no idea what we were getting into. All we could do was pray and unlock the doors. And I remember standing around in a circle. We all held hands, about 10:55, and we prayed that God would bless our business, and we unlocked the doors. And that's when it started happening. At first, it was friends and family started coming in, and they knew what we were going through, so I was so thankful. And then, this was an important lesson. It was all the people that we had served in the community. You want to grow your business, you serve your customers. That's how you grow your business. Third, people we didn't know who they were, and they came in, and they started just piling in, and more, and that line wrapped around the building, and we were so flat-footed. We had no idea what we were doing. We closed the doors at night. Okay? First day we ever had as a company, we did $3,500 in sales. Okay? To this day, that remains the lowest day in sales we've ever had as a company. That first year, that little teeny place, we closed at over an average of almost $12,000 a day in sales. When I said earlier, it's a blessing when God allows things to happen that are so far beyond you, because then you realize it's nothing to do with you. We're now blessed. We have 15 stores. We got 1,000 wonderful people on our team, and it is our job to make sure that everybody understands we started this as a ministry, and the only reason that we're successful is because we run this thing like a ministry, and we keep God in the center of it. And one of the most important things that I teach them is that when you're serving a brisket sandwich, you are never just serving a brisket sandwich just to make a profit or for business sales. You are having the opportunity, every single brisket sandwich you serve, you have the chance to impact somebody's life. Be it from the profit that we take and we put back in the community, or quite frankly, the biggest challenge I get them is that lesson I learned from Dan. You have such an opportunity every single day to make an impact on somebody's life. And so many times we think to be significant, we have to go out and build a pharmacy or build an orphanage or go across seas to do God's work. Well, you know what? You have the opportunity. It presents itself to you, not just the people who walk in, but the people that you're sitting side by side with. Pour into their life. Ask them how they're doing. Share your love with them. Show care. Lift them up. Give them a compliment. You know, those little things have the amazing power to impact and change somebody's life. And never, ever, ever underestimate that. Thank you. I will close. We missed it by just a little bit. I will close with one of my favorite sayings. Nelson Mandela quoted this in his acceptance speech years ago. He said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure and capable of doing all that we are called to do. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us the most. I pray each and every one of you listen to God's word and you have that courage to pursue the dream that He put in your heart. And I pray that you never, ever, ever underestimate the impact that you can make on somebody's life just with your kindness. Thank you very much, and God bless you.